to do one more thing right here. Go live. Oh, come on.
Is it working?
Almost.
Open.
There we go.
Oh,
That sounded
Jesus.
way worse than maybe it was.
it hit my
Sounded like
keys, so it
broken
sounded
glass.
like the bourbon's shattering now. First it's tipping, now it's
This
shattered.
place is a mess. There's like boxes everywhere. There's a freaking sign on the ground.
Is that were you packing up for trade show?
Yeah, that's what
Yeah.
I'm doing. It's gonna be a hot mess in about a couple of days. This whole studio gets packed up. This whole corner comes with the deer mounts come off, the TV comes off the wall, everything goes. So it's just a mad dash. Which you have experienced. You understand.
Matt's really excited.
Is he actually? It's like we put him to
He's
work.
not excited to set it up. He's like, well, I know I'll be setting it up again.
Yeah, I
Probably
said
be
bad back,
something we're going to switch the left side to the right side or the back.
which we had to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think we're good this year to just do it. I have to actually buy a piece of wood. I just forgot because the bar part of it cracked.
Oh,
All
really?
full off. So like the whole piece of wood is just not existent.
The top?
There's like a little bar you could rest on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That
not.
like separate piece?
Yeah, it's broken. Yes, I
Put it on the to-do list, Clark.
yeah, I gotta do that. Maybe we'll wait till Matt does it. There's a Home Depot up there. Just go buy some lumber and a
I'll do it in 3 minutes.
The OK.
Oh boy, here we go.
This is the OKest Hunter podcast. Never pass on shooter bucks, if that's just meat in the freezer. It's your tag, you hunt how you want. This is OKest Hunter.
I was gonna hit the button, but now I took too long. I forgot. I was gonna try to figure something out with these cards. Like,
You gonna bring them with to the trade show? Or what do you...
yeah, but I was like, could we do like, draw a high card to see who does the intro this week?
Ooh, ooh.
Do you want to do it now? See what happens?
Not now, but maybe next time when
Maybe
Greg's
next time.
here.
We'll just like shuffle the deck.
That'd be kind of fun. I think we should then.
There's got to be some other card games we can incorporate into this podcast to like spruce things up a little bit.
Yeah, well, yeah, we should do some sprucing, and then for our pre-gun season episode, we should make a couple cards and draw cards of like shoot the first doe you see, and then you got to do that on opening day, and then like we'll not see any, so none of us will actually have to do it, but it's kind of fun to think about it. Like,
well, you've seen like the Jake Break guys; they have like this card thing that they do where they actually like play poker throughout the season. So when they're in the blind, they draw a card, and then if you shoot something, you get to keep that card, and then that builds towards your poker hand or something.
Wow.
I'm actually pretty confused about it, but it's a thing, and people like the thing, and they're like really into that thing, and it's all around the deck of cards.
We'd have to shoot a lot more deer in order to get 5-card.
Well,
poker.
apparently one card that one of the guys drew was the same card he drew the next year, and now it's like the lucky card because he killed
one
deer with it. It's like marked because I don't know. You have to talk to the Jake Break Hollow guys about this. Go watch their show and figure it out. But it's a whole damn thing. We're brought to you by Nosler. Check out nosler.com. They had an email thing with the iOS update. So if you go to the social channel and you see a picture of a phone just sitting there, it's not a picture, it's a video, and they describe how to like go into the Apple settings to make sure you get their emails. So just heads up for that. I'm not even looking at the right damn camera. Our film is ready to go. It was ready and uploaded to Dropbox. And one of the logos was an older version of a logo for one of our partners. So it had to get redone and then re-uploaded. And it's like a 20+ minute long video. So that's going to be a hot minute. But the goal is that I can still get it ready to go by Friday.
Because I think you have the post date, the published date for
it on
Friday.
there.
Yeah. So we got sneak peek it. I showed it to my parents and my wife this past weekend.
They like it?
Well, I mean, we were with my parents. we were having a few cocktails, and there was a lot of talking. So they liked what they saw, but it was pretty tough for them to follow the storyline because we were all just being a bunch of idiots. So yeah,
that makes sense.
But I mean, they thought the visuals looked great. So good job, Keegan.
The visuals were great. Everything was pretty. Yeah, I'm excited. So Nosler's like they had a big part of that. So you'll see. I'm not going to say too much more, but just check it out. Use code OHP at nosler.com when you buy your ammo, and you'll save 20%. And then, what I want to say. So this is what am I holding here? This is the Gerber LST Ultra, and LST stands for light, smooth, and tough. This thing is very light. it is pretty smooth, and it's got this like 2-stage
I
bump
saw
out.
that. Yeah,
Like it stops
right there.
and then it keeps going, and I like it because it's got the thumb. I don't like
Instead of the press-in
the
like this one's
yeah.
got.
I don't like the press-ins as much. I don't think. I like the thumb.
The only person as excited as I am to have all these cool Gerber blades is my son Gus. Just freaking, he's like, "You have more!" And like, so we have like a whole collection. We have like a drawer of multi-tools and the knives and stuff. So we can only like check them out when I'm there with him. But we have been sharpening sticks and making for it. We've been busy.
That's pretty fantastic. Yeah, well, they have you can customize them too. So if you go to the Gerber website, you can there's like a knife customizer, and you can customize a whole bunch of different aspects of it from the blade. Like I think I just haven't had a chance to sit down and do it yet, but I'm gonna make one with the OKS Hunter antler on the blade,
Heck yeah.
like as a pattern, and then you can pick your handle color, the style. You can spruce it up, and you can really kind of go to town with the customization. So I think it could be like a really cool gift if you're like getting married and you want to get something for your groomsman
Yeah.
or your buddy for his birthday, or
Your husband.
yeah, like just a really neat concept. So I went through the customization like it's part of their website, and I was like, oh, I didn't realize I could do this much. I'm gonna have to come back to this because I thought it was gonna be more basic, and I just wanted to do more, so and be more thoughtful.
That was a hint to my wife. She listens to the first 10 minutes.
And I'll take a custom knife. Yeah. Yeah. So check out Latitude Outdoors as well. I know they're gonna be at a couple trade shows. We talked about that last week, but like they have some new stuff coming out. So I imagine we'll start to see some of their other stuff start to go on sale to try to clear house to make room for the new stuff. So now would be a great time to buy. Actually, you buy things off season, you save a ton of money in doing so. That's at least my general recommendation. And then Rack Hub, check out rackhub.com. This is not everyone, certainly not everyone because I'm not, but finding sheds if you want to display them in a really creative, thoughtful, nice manner, not just have them lay in a pile or on a table. You can put them up on the wall in ways that like actually probably make your wife happy and appreciate the decor.
Heck yeah.
So it's a very nice way to mount antlers. Not the cheapest way, not the most expensive way, probably a bit of a middle ground, but they are like
Probably looks the nicest. to
probably
be
a pretty
honest.
classy way to do it. Yeah. Like I could see their stuff living in like the Home and Garden website or something.
Well, it
or
just
like,
it just looks really sleek, and it's like you can get like it customized also, but like it's a really nice like just black like
Yeah.
metal look where like I've got like the invisible plastic ones that you like screw to the wall, and those like do the job, but they
it's
don't
different.
look as nice. Like this
Yeah.
looks like
It's like, oh, there's
like
an
a
antler floating
showpiece.
on the wall, but
It
this
looks
is
like
like
a showpiece.
yeah,
It looks
yeah.
nice.
for sure. Anyway, there's that, and then Quick Trip has their ice cream brackets going on right now. Have you seen this?
Ice cream brackets? Is this
Yeah,
for
like they're
March
pitting all the
Madness?
flavors against each other. Yeah.
No.
So I don't know what I'm gonna pick for my flavors, but I'm probably gonna lose because like, am I picking what I want or what I think is gonna win?
Yeah.
Because then that's kind of tricky. So
I'll have to do some more research on that. I'm unfamiliar with the ice cream brackets.
it's like make me really want some ice cream, and it's only March, so the madness is real. Yeah. I like when it gets late and I finally have 2 seconds after the kids go to bed, it's either like a bowl of cereal or a bowl of ice cream. Both terrible choices, but like so good for the soul, which is why I can't seem to get out of like being out of shape.
I
Can't
hear you.
outrun the calories.
I hear you, bud.
Well, we do have a guest today, so I want to bring him on. We got Michael Perry with us. Michael Perry is a hell of an author and has written several books, of which I have 2 sitting here with me: 40 Acres Deep and Truck, a Love Story. And I think I'm pretty sure he does stand-up comedy to some capacity, and all around good dude. And I'm delighted to talk to him because he's a Wisconsin native here who
Yeah.
I think
Wisconsin boy.
could really like. I mean, he could dethrone me and become the host of the show tonight. I mean, like he's got the vibe for OKS Hunter for sure.
Time will tell. I'm excited to hear some stories.
Michael, thanks for joining us tonight.
Hey, I'm really glad to be here. Appreciate you having me on.
You don't gotta lie to be really glad to be here. It's okay. You could be honest with us. You're like, how did I end up here?
Honestly, it ain't that difficult, man. I'm just in my garage. So
Oh, happy accidents, Which you had a great line right before we hit the record button about how you came to do what you do. So if you could just I'm sure you're very comfortable doing this because you've done lots of speaking gigs, but just walk us through like who you are, how you got to where you are, and some of the, I don't know, things that you've been doing for a long time. Not to make it sound like you're too old, but You're seasoned.
Well,
You're
the,
seasoned.
the good news for me is that I was conceived in Illinois, but mom made it over the Wisconsin border before I was born.
Ooh, there's a win.
Smart woman.
So
Well done, Ma.
yeah, I thank her daily. But yeah, I was born in Wisconsin Rapids, Wisconsin. My dad worked at the paper mills over there in the Nakusa area, Port Edwards. But when I was 2, they bought a farm up in New Albern, Wisconsin, which is about 40 minutes north of Eau Claire, Wisconsin. And so that's all I remember. I grew up on the farm, milking cows, baling hay. In the winter, we logged. And then at the age of 16, I started working summers on a ranch in Wyoming, a regular working beef and hay ranch, rode roundup, did branding, and worked on the hay crew. And so I worked out starting from the age of 16 every summer for the next 5 years. I worked in Wyoming on that ranch. And somewhere in there, I started college and I went to nursing school. And I always like to say, I was the only cowboy in all of Wisconsin or in all of Wyoming who was putting himself through nursing school. And I based this on several conversations I had around the old Brandon fire. I was what they called a header, which meant we'd do a roundup in the morning and then they'd bring the calves into the corrals and we'd brand them. And so they'd rope the calf and they'd bring it in and I'd meet the calf and grab it and throw it and wrestle it, as they called it, and hold it while they branded it. And so I'd be down there in the mud and the blood and whatever else. And some crusty old cowboy would walk up behind me with a red hot branding iron and he'd say, "Where are you from, son?" "Wisconsin." "What do you do?" "I'm going to college." "What for?" "I want to be a nurse." And it'd get really quiet out there on the prairie. But anyways, so I went to nursing school and I got my nursing degree and I passed my boards. And I got my license and started working as a nurse. And it's funny, I didn't think of this until this very second.
Oh, this is
But
great.
my very first nursing job, I worked for a surgeon and I went and interviewed for the job. And the interview went fine. And then he said, "Before you agree to this job, there's one thing you need to know. If you're looking for a lot of hours," he said, "the last week of November, I don't work because I go deer hunting." And I said,
My man.
"That's going to be perfect."
I'll start right now.
That's we have a deal. So I started working for him, and then I worked for him for a while, and then I worked on a rehab unit for neurological disorder, traumatic brain injuries, spinal cord injuries, amputations, that kind of stuff. And then in the meantime, I had started working as an EMT on the ambulance. And somewhere in there, I started writing things and I submitted my stuff to magazines. That's back when there used to be magazines. And I started to get published here and there. And I was a weird kid in that I was a complete pickup truck driving, deer hunting, football playing knucklehead. But I loved books. I read from the time my mom taught me to read when I was 4 years old, and I just read piles and piles of books. We didn't have television. I was raised in a setting where we weren't allowed to watch TV, but it had books all the time. And so I was kind of just your average roughneck knucklehead, but I loved books. And so I've always had a capacity for language. I can't diagram a sentence to save my life, but I don't know what a split infinitive is, but I write by ear from reading all those years. And so I just started writing and I started to get writing gigs. And so at some point I just quit my job and I thought, you know what, I'm going to try to be a writer. I don't know how that works, but I've got my nursing license. If everything goes to heck, I can get a nursing job in short order. And well, 30 some years later, that's still the plan.
Jeez, 30 years
working
later.
out.
That's
Awesome.
incredible.
Good for you.
Yeah, it's worked out. I've been done like 25 books and lots of tons of magazine articles, and I write scripts and I do some voiceover work and I, just whatever it takes basically. But none of what we talk about today, none of it happens if I don't sit down and write. And fortunately, I like writing. So
you enjoy it. So I've heard I've been told I should write a book at some point. I probably will attempt it. I don't know if I'll ever finish it, but
You need
I have
to.
a few pals that have written books, and so I've talked to them about it. And this whole concept of sitting down, locking yourself in a room, so to speak, and staring at a blank cursor could really throw some people. And then guess what doesn't happen? The writing, because you just keep finding ways to distract yourself. I gotta imagine if you enjoy it as much as it sounds like you do, it probably comes a little bit more natural, but I'm sure it's still not easy. And to your point, I can't craft a sentence to save my life. I don't know about. I don't know what
find it-
the structure is.
Yeah.
I'm terrible. Also,
Well, I mean, one thing that always helped me is I do a lot of work with musicians. There was a stretch of time where I did a ton of writing about musicians and went on the road with them and toured with them and wrote about their lives. And so I learned a lot from watching musicians. And then I have a band, and I'm not a very good musician. I know basically 4 chords and 2 rhythms, but and I write songs and we perform a few shows a year. And I mean, the one thing that I learned from musicians is there's more than one way to go about whatever you're doing. And I definitely write by ear. And I know musicians who've made a living all over the world playing music, and they can't read a note of music. They play by ear. On the other hand, I have another friend, a jazz pianist buddy, who you could throw down the most complicated piece of music in the world in front of him, and he can read it note for note off the actual sheet music and just play it brilliantly and improvise. And so there's more than one way to go about it. And I just happened to be someone who learned it backwards. I was just a farm kid who'd read a lot of books, and I stubbornly wanted to be self-employed too. So, and the thing, when you ask if it gets easier, no, actually for me, it gets harder, because I think the better you get at something, then the more you understand what it takes to really do it to the height that you've
yeah,
achieved.
maybe in the beginning when you're a little naive, it's probably not a bad thing.
Yeah, I always used to joke, man, when I first started, I just wrote a lot of bad poetry, but I thought it was amazing because I was, sitting in a coffee shop feeling pensive. And so it all seemed brilliant. That's right. And then eventually, when I went full-time freelance, I mean, freelance just means self-employed. And so to this day, everything I write, I put as much heart as I can into it. I try to be artful, but I'm also really pretty cold-blooded about the fact that this is how I feed my kids. This is how our family makes a living. And I joked with you guys before we came on air that I get asked at writing conferences, they'll say, "Where do you get your inspiration?" And I always say, well, my muse is a little bald-headed guy named Jim. He sits in a swivel chair 9 miles up the road from me at the Chautauqua State Bank, and he holds my mortgage. And if I don't write another book, he takes my house away. So it's a symbiotic relationship. So
Yeah.
inspiration will only take you so far. It's like hunting. It's all well and good to sit there and talk about it, but eventually you got to go plant yourself in a tree.
Mike, I'm just curious. You mentioned, growing up being like a high school football player and the outdoors guy, driving the pickup truck, going hunting with your buddies, and maybe it was different in your area of Wisconsin, but typically reading books and writing poetry is not a real big thing that you want to announce to your buddies when you're a high school football player. Did that have anything to do with you pursuing a nursing degree? Was it like, hey, maybe I don't want to start right out the gate because I'm not supposed to be writing and doing this? Or
No.
was that just something that really interested you? I'm just curious.
Well, the nursing thing is funny because half of it makes perfect sense. My mom was a nurse. I grew up in a house where my parents took in legions of foster kids, and I have adopted siblings. And a lot of those kids had very serious illnesses or serious disabilities. And so I grew up in a house where we were doing tube feedings, and we knew how to set up oxygen tanks when we were young. And one of my little sisters had a terminal condition where she was getting a lot of surgeries and stuff. And I was the oldest child in the family. So I often had to accompany my mom to the hospital because my dad had to stay home and milk cows. And so when it came to becoming a nurse, I knew the gig. I had a pretty good understanding of what I was getting into. And then my mom had modeled how to be a good nurse. As far as making the decision, though, I unfortunately remember the exact moment I decided to be a nurse. So I told you I was a pretty well-read kid, but I didn't have to work too hard in school, and I got decent grades. And there was this deal that if you had good grades, you could go to the library. You could get out of class and go to the library and listen to the college recruiters. Well, I would go down to the library, but I was a voracious reader. So instead of sitting at the table with the recruiter, I'd go over and read Sports Illustrated at the magazine rack. And I remember sitting at the magazine rack, and the recruiter from this college was with all the other true students. And she was just going through a list of majors. She like, you can do econ, you can do business, you can do biology, you can do sociology, you could do nursing. And I was looking at Sports Illustrated. I can still see the picture of a football player in my lap. And I went, nursing, that sounds interesting. I'll do that.
That's awesome.
Yes.
Right. So, but in the end, it turned out to be a really wise decision because, and I've written about this, that nurses are trained, you're trained to do human assessment. And that's what writing is. You're just looking at the people and the things around you and trying to draw some sort of conclusion and then write about it in a way that will speak to other people. And as far as whether or not I had to pay a price for being a male nurse, I've heard all the jokes. I know them all inside and out. But what I like to say is that when I moved, so I grew up in New Auburn, farm kid, football player, good student. I left. I came back 12 years later. I liked a long-haired writer with soft hands and a nursing degree. So there was a certain, as I like to say, there was a certain amount of street cred to recover with some of my buddies in the deer hunting crowd. And I always joke too that when I joined the volunteer fire department right away when I moved back, and I always say I was the first volunteer in village history to miss the monthly meeting because of a poetry reading. But the bottom line was, as long as you grab the hose and run into the burning barn, they really don't care what you do in your spare time. So it was fun.
That's good to hear. I mean, that speaks a ton to the level of confidence you have and just comfortability in your own skin. And I think that's freaking awesome,
Breaking
because
stereotypes.
too many people are like obsessed about and not to like throw shade, but the hunting community in general, like there's a lot of masculinity in hunting. And so like people make fun, but sometimes they kind of mean it because they're like threatened or intimidated or like feel their sense of identity is being attacked by something. And I find that to be pretty damn awesome, because even today you would get some like pushback. You want to be a nurse? Your generation, totally, it's far less heard of that's what you'd be doing to pursue a career.
Oh yeah, the day I walked into the school of nursing, and there's the locker room for the men, which was of course very, very tiny. But I walked in there, and the first thing I saw was graffiti on the wall that I won't quote the graffiti, but it questioned my masculinity. And the funny part of that was I remember that moment clearly because it was a very offensive thing that someone had written about male nurses are blank. And I just remember I had just finished a season of wrestling wild cattle out in Wyoming, and I just thought, yeah, I wish that dude was here right now.
Yeah, right. Like if they only knew, I could
tell about how he got the snot beat out of him by a nursing student.
That's it's almost like this is not a great analogy or like comparison, but there's this thing called Highway 100 when I was growing up in West Dallas, Wisconsin, and people just cruise with their cars all the time. And I always loved this idea of a sleeper car that looked like it didn't have anything
like
under the
lame,
hood.
yeah.
And then you got the guys that show up and they're trying to like bedazzle every inch of their car and make it known that they got a lot going on there. And then you just smoke the shit out of them in grandma's car. And like, I just taken dig at the egos. There's something about it that I just like, I don't know. It's the best.
The career thing, like Mike was saying, obviously male nurse has got a little stigma to it there, but like I get that from both ends also. So like,
yeah,
when I'm an art teacher, so like when people meet you and they know you're an art teacher, right? They make a few
some
presumptions
yeah.
about what you do, and then when they find out that I'm like a deer hunter and outdoorsman, like,
they don't know what to do.
You also kill animals? Like, you can't do that. Or vice versa. People who know me through hunting or through the podcast are like, oh, what do you do again? I'm an art teacher. Oh, you finger paint all day? Yeah, pretty much. Like, so I get what you're saying with the stigma and that ego part. So
what's that? Wedding Crashers? Oh, Mr. Conservationist is also a bird hunter.
I find that very interesting.
I find that very interesting.
They're decimating the population, Jeremy.
They're decimating the grub population. The movies I could quote for days, which we do often here. So, I mean, you got to have some great deer hunting stories, and you also, I'd like to maybe like hear a little more about this truck, because there are pictures you shared of this what's it? It's not International Scout. What is it? It's a
1951 L120 3/4 ton long bed international harvester pickup truck.
Harvester pickup.
I bought it off some guy hauling firewood for I think $125 or $150 when I was in college. So I was going to nursing school. It was my only vehicle for 3 years, and it was a piece of junk when I bought it, and it always has been a piece of junk. But yeah, I wrote a book called Truck: A Love Story. And the arc of that book is me taking that old truck and tearing it down and trying to scrub the rust off it, and then rebuilding it with the help of my brother-in-law. One of the things, as long as we're talking about masculinity and stereotypes and tropes
Mhm.
and all that stuff. So I grew up logging and farming, running heavy equipment. And in Wyoming, not only did I do, rough and tumble roundup and stuff, but I ran big equipment, and I can change out a spun bearing, and I can run a gas hatchet, and I can do some bubblegum welding. But I have no ability as a mechanic. Once you lift the hood, I mean, I can scratch and spit, and then I can say, well, looks like we're going to have to pull her. But other than that, that's it. I don't know what you do with her once you pull her. And
It's like a dog that catches a car. I finally caught one, but not.
Shit.
so I'm that guy that, like, I'm very comfortable in that blue collar ethic. And I still split my own firewood here and go hunting and that sort of thing. But I had to get my brother-in-law to help me tear down this truck and put it back together, because he's actually a really talented mechanic. But the arc of that book is just me tearing it down and then putting it back together. And the goal was, my dream was to get that truck running and fixed up enough so that I could haul a buck deer out of the woods with it. And it's not a spoiler. It's just at the end of the book that dream comes true. I think the very last portion of that book, I talk about going out hunting and getting a modest little buck. And
Can we talk about that hunt first? Could that be one? Like, maybe that's not the most notable one necessarily in the bank of stories you have, but I'd love to hear how that felt to be able to do.
Well-
Like, I know it's in the book and it's but like, you have this truck. It's seen some things. You've dripped. Like, did you put a buck in the back of that truck? And like, how did that feel? That had to be a really incredible feeling.
yeah, it was great because so I started deer hunting. I first missed school for deer hunting in 3rd grade. Still too young to carry.
That was like the kids you used to teach up north.
Oh yeah, past you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in our school, deer hunting was just, there was no school. They just gave up because nobody's going to show up anyway. And I'm kind of exhibit A, because my parents were quite strict. They were gentle, lovely folks, but they had principles, and you were expected to live up to them. And the idea of skipping school just wasn't in the cards, except for deer hunting. And I was also a good student, and I actually liked school, but yeah, deer hunting, forget it. So in 3rd grade, I remember my grandpa was up hunting, and he shot a deer, and we were allowed to skip school to go help him get that deer. And ever since then, yeah, I've never missed a deer hunting. So the thing that was a little different about the hunt where I got the deer that I hauled out in that truck was that it was just the culmination of a long project, a truck that I really loved. And again, I'm country enough, and that I don't have to fake it. That's where I come from. I was at a memorial service this past weekend for a fallen firefighter, and man, I've been a volunteer firefighter and EMT for 30 some years too. And one of the things I love about going to something that involves a bunch of volunteer firefighters in a small town is they don't give a rip about me having a New York Times best-selling book. We're just going to shoot the breeze. We're going to talk about firefighting. We're going to tell, at this little get together, it was a somber get together, but of course you end up telling stories and laughing. And so I feel very comfortable in that setting. And so one of the things that was wonderful about that hunt was to get up in the morning and to climb into an old truck, a 1951 International that's already got way more life on it than I do, and to drive with those horrible little 6-volt headlights out 5 Mile Road, which is the road that I grew up on, and drive out to the back 40 of the farm where my dad raised me, and sit in that. I think I had a little wooden stand that we knocked together, and then to have a deer show up when you kind of hope it'll show up, and show up where you think it might show up. And we all know how rare that is. And then to successfully get a good clean shot and put it down. And then to have my brother-in-law, who was hunting on the other side of the swamp, he got a buck too. And to be able to load the buck up and then just drive it out of the woods in my own $150 pickup truck was perfect, man. That's the stuff dreams are made of where I come from.
That is picturesque.
It's a cool
Like,
it's a cool culmination, because so much of like what we do in the outdoor industry now, and like through different podcasts, the culmination is like building all this history with the deer. But like, you're a guy who's in the woods, and like the deer played a small part of that, and it was like part of your mission, but it was this cool passion project that was the main part of that culmination. And it's like, that just goes to like your tag. Everybody's doing it for different reasons, and you got to put it all together in your own way, and to enjoy it with. Sounds like you got to enjoy it with your brother-in-law who helped you build the truck. That's just a hell of a day.
It
Yeah,
really
I'm bombing out of the woods in that truck with a deer neck. And one of the
big
ways,
grin to boot too, I'm sure.
what's that?
And a big grin to boot too, I'm sure, like just smiling ear to ear.
Well, there you go. That never gets old. I've been hunting, like I said, since third grade and carrying a gun since whenever I was 12. And yeah, the idea that you've been doing it that long and it's still thrilling. I mean, this year I didn't have a lot of luck as far as seeing big antlers, and as a matter of fact, and I'm safe to tell it on this show. Very late in the week, it was getting to be time to fill the freezer, and our family eats venison year round, and so I'm interested in filling the freezer, and I saw a little doe. I scoped her. I watched. Actually, she was a decent sized doe. Scoped, watched, and when I got a nice clean shot and dropped her very cleanly, and then when I walked up, behind her ears were two little pencils, and and I thankfully I had the tag. I was perfectly legal and everything. But there was a case where that is a fond memory to me. My first thought wasn't, oh crap, why did that happen? I was like, no, that's what happened this time. And that deer tastes great, by the way.
Oh yeah.
The judgment and ridicule and I think it's actually gotten a little bit better. I don't know if that has anything to do with us or not. I'm not saying that, but I am saying the grip and grins that get posted, or some that don't because there's fear of ridicule and shame and all that stuff, is fascinating to me. To go back to your other point about the guy who spray painted the boys, the men's locker room or changing room for nursing school, and if that guy would have been there and you could have exchanged words, he might have got the magic eraser out if those existed back then. And the second someone could say, well, this is why I did it or why it was important to me. And if you did a grip or grin, let's just say someone then said what they said and it's not great, they're going to get serious foot and mouth syndrome when they realize why you did it. And they go, oh, that's actually really badass and really cool. And like, there's always that veil of you don't know what's going on behind the photo that led to that decision and what went into it and or why that person hunts. And I think that should be something people really think about before they open their damn mouths, i.e. start typing on the internet.
Which is not required, by the way.
You don't have to have an opinion.
Need to make.
You can just.
You don't have to.
You don't have to. You could just keep going on. I've posted about these things, and
I think one of the things that occurs to me as you're saying this, that if I have my head bounces all over the place, as you can tell, but if I can keep these two thoughts straight, there's a parallel. So me being a male nurse from a small roughneck town, me being a writer, me going to poetry readings, but also training to fight fires. There's a parallel too to this, what we're talking about with the hunting thing. I want to make it clear. I got a buddy down the hill from me here who's completely into big racks and has all of the cameras. And when I'm with him, we're looking at his phone constantly and he's got them all named and everything. And what works there is that when I moved in, he was, or actually he moved in secondarily, but I always introduced myself to the neighbors because I keep to myself. I'm pretty much a loner. I like it that way. We've got a lovely isolated patch here, but for the sake of deer hunting, I always make sure to introduce myself. And when I introduced myself to him, we had the deer hunting talk and I pretty quickly figured out what kind of hunting he did. And I just told him, I said, I love to get a big rack as much as the next guy. I do still have some residual testosterone, but I said, I'm also, we eat venison all year round. So at some point I'll just start filling the freezer. And it got to the point with us. He didn't change the way he was hunting. I didn't change the way I was hunting, but we could talk about it. And I think that's that whole thing. The social media consists of people far away from us, keeping us angry at each other. Whereas if I just talk to my neighbor and we could joke about it, we could be goofy about it. And honestly, I adjusted a little bit of I didn't just go full scale. If it's brown, it's down right out of the gate. I'm like, I'll give you till say Thursday, but it just comes down to that human connection. And you find out people are closer than they think. We're just so easily driven apart these days. And so I did want to make sure in this podcast that I make it clear that no, I have plenty of friends who who are into a different type of deer hunting than me, but we just, I don't know, we talk about it.
That's the best. I mean, it's very much like road rage, where it cloaks the human element. You just piss at another inanimate object who's just slighted you on the road, and you fly off the handle, and then you pull up next to them at a stoplight, and you're about to freak out, and you're like, "Oh, there's a baby in the back," or they're like, they're
Yeah.
just a human going through human things, and they happen to be on the damn road, and there's a human in the car. Like,
Well, and
we're
I
all
get
just
I get it from the other side too, as you can imagine as a writer, I spend time in some circles where hunting is not common, firearms are not common, and I'll get the sort of aghast thing from that side, and I'm able to just explain to them, this is just part of my culture. I grew up with it. It's not my it is not my leading identity. It's just part of it. Uh, just as being a writer is not 100% my identity. I don't just sit around and think deep thoughts all day.
people can be multifaceted and hold separate,
No, they
different
can't.
hold different beliefs at the same time. I love that. Uh, it's important to talk about, I think, and it's important to remember that human connection. And I think that's the quintessential nature of deer hunting, is that it is a connection. So it doesn't matter what you do. If someone comes to the deer woods, that's an experience that we can all relate to on that deep level and go, "Oh, you experienced your heart popping out of your chest too?"
Yeah.
And that adrenaline rush that can only come from deer hunting. Like, once another person experienced that thing, you can now bond over something through time. Like, it transcends time, it transcends everything, because these stories are, though very unique and different per each one. Like, she came this way, she came up that way, the buck did this, the buck did that. Like, we have the literal components that make up a story, but at the end of the day, the same thing's always true. Like, the deer showed up, you drew back, and shit got weird, and maybe you got her, maybe you didn't. And like, the feeling you feel, that's universal by and large, and that's what's important. That's the uniting bond of the deer hunting community that I think we're like forgetting about a little bit.
I think it's slowly coming
I
back.
think you're
but-
right. I
but
think
we
it is.
definitely like put that in the back seat for a while.
Yeah.
And the whole industry started pushing
Because there's commerce.
the trophy aspect, right? Like, market all these products. You want big deer. Don't hunt with your buddies. Don't do the deer camp. It's not going to be as
Go
effective.
get it done.
Get your cameras
Yeah.
out. Get your food plots in and shoot. Past those bucks. Trophy deer management. And then I think people did that, and that's where, like, in Wisconsin, where we all come from, we have such an awesome tradition of like deer camp. Like, everyone
kids
took
don't go
off,
to school this
9-day
week,
gun
yeah.
deer season, and everybody went up. All Uncle Timmy went, and Uncle Ty. They didn't even hunt, but they went up there. Blah blah blah. And that the check station, we used to have the check stations. As soon as those people started to realize that the connection is what they missed, that's the part of the hunt that
It's the
was the
glue,
most
yeah,
rewarding.
yeah.
It wasn't just that buck at the end of the blood trail, but like, now people are starting to come back to, like, man, make deer camp great again. Like, bring everybody back together
Mhm.
and get that sense of community
Yeah.
back in. Podcasts, tried to hold that together for a little while. I think people were getting a little bit of that camaraderie from listening to people talk about it, but it's not the same as sitting in camp with, stinky socks and smelly farts and
And all the
chili
stories
that's,
and
3 days
people
too
farting,
old.
and yeah, it's crazy. The social media fodder that you could achieve by tagging a big buck, though, it's actually pretty overwhelming. But it's super short-lived and carries no weight in contrast to the genuine connection you get in real life.
It's a good way to
And I think some folks think that when they tag that big buck and post it and they get that grip and grin, they'll get the flood of that notoriety, that recognition. They'll get that dopamine hit of their social going off the chain. They think that's going to make them feel good, but it doesn't do anything, because just the same as bad publicity, it's all people you don't know. It's like on your birthday. I just had a birthday. You just had a birthday. Hundreds of birthday notes from people I haven't talked to in probably 20 years. Thank you for the notes. Great to hear from everybody, sincerely. But like, that didn't do anything for my day. Like, if anything else, if Facebook didn't consolidate those, it'd have been quite annoying. What mattered to me is that I got to spend the day with my kids and like hang out with them and my family. Like, that's the important part. And so, unfortunately, some people, these younger folks, are chasing this vanity, this dead air. It's not, there's no oxygen in it. It's just stale. Anyway, I'll get off my little soapbox. This is a fun topic.
I've had a sort of a view of that in, I spent years, as I mentioned earlier, I wrote about country music for many, many years, long enough ago now that if I say who I was with, it's not that cool. But you know, I've watched behind the scenes what it takes to sustain something that big. And now when you have influencers and you have social media, I'm actually benefiting. I'm a pretty much an unknown Midwestern mid-list writer. And yet I make a decent living because I just get out there and hustle. I have enough of a core audience. I don't have to bend myself into shapes that I don't want to bend myself into. And it speaks a little bit to what you were referring to. It's fine to get that big hit, but then it used to be like a year later, they want another hit. Well, now they want another hit within the next 24 hours. And what you have to do to sustain that is difficult. And I think to take things in a happier way, I as I mentioned to you guys earlier, I don't this is unusual for me. I'm really enjoying this because I don't do a lot of hunting podcasts. I'm mostly on literature
You're the
podcasts.
first of many now. Watch.
And so I don't want to speak of things I don't know, but I will say that, I did a little watching of some other podcasts, and there are things to unite us, man. I mean, we have shared interests and we have overlapping interests, and I do see talk of that, and I'm hoping that's coming back. Now, the way I've always approached it is, even, way back when I wrote an article, and I think we're putting up a link at some point to this. I have a weekly, it's not even really a podcast. It's a very short little Substack, audio Substack. But last November, I wrote about an article I wrote many years ago for Whitetail magazine about me hunting. And I said, just like I mentioned earlier, I've made a living writing about my own incompetence. And of course, I didn't write the articles about how to get the monster buck or how to dial your 30-06 in from 300 yards. I wrote the one about using a climbing tree stand, somehow winding up upside down, hanging by one foot with buck scent dripping up my nose.
Oh, Jesus.
And I told you guys too, I mean, I'm the guy that, as a matter of fact, the firefighter that I saw this weekend at this service was one of the guys that I went goose hunting with him, and we went, we were miles from home, and I pull out my shotgun, and I had a trigger lock on it. And of course the key was 15 miles away. And I've done that twice deer hunting here. I had little kids. When I had little kids around, I was really careful about the trigger locks. And so I got up. One of the things I really despise, I'm a sweaty guy. When I get started, I can't stop. And so I always will invariably be late on opening day. And then you end up overdressing and hustling to your stand. Then you get in the stand and you're just dripping with sweat, which means you're going to be uncomfortable now. So I remember one year, and I wrote about this in one of the books, I don't remember which, but I got up very early. I had everything laid out. I got dressed. I got all my supplies. I went down and I walked slowly and leisurely to my stand, well pre-dawn, got up, sat down, settled in, was so proud of myself, and then laid my hand on the trigger guard and felt, of course, the lock. And the key was all the way back up the valley in my office. And so I had to jog back up. And so I'm steaming with sweat and anger by the time I actually get back down to the stand.
All for a damn deer too. You're like, what am I doing? At some point you start questioning your life decisions, like, what am I doing out here?
Should have questioned them before you went down there. But yeah, I think that's the other thing, that the humor is always great, because however you approach hunting, we've all made fools of ourselves in the process. So
we have, and that's our brand in a nutshell.
Embracing that instead of
yeah.
There was a time, and I think it's being embraced far and far more. And again, it's not because of us necessarily. I just do see that there's more of a appetite for relatability and a human approach to things, because it got so glamorous and refined and professional and posed.
So
it's like
serious.
And by the way, that happens to everything. I think it's in the book Truck, A Love Story. I wrote about yoga. So my wife is a very serious student of yoga and meditation. And she's a farm girl, grew up in rural Wisconsin, can chop the head off a chicken and drive a pickup truck and throw a hay bale, but got very much into meditation and yoga and is an instructor. But I remember, and I think it's in the book, I said, when you see a yoga mat for sale in Farm and Fleet, that it's gone beyond the original purpose, right? That's just what we do in America, and it's part of the beauty of this country, is free enterprise. And I'm a self-employed writer, so I'm all, I sell t-shirts too, so I'm all for it. But of course, at some point, things tend to over-rev and it becomes over-commercialized, or we get way too focused on the one very specific top peak tier performance thing. And so eventually, yeah, you hope that you can kind of settle back down and relax a little bit and remember that part of the deal here is we're supposed to enjoy this.
Well, I can see the pendulum swinging the other way too. If it gets too raw and unfiltered and gritty and like, self-produced, at some point people are going to want to crave nice things again.
Quality, yeah.
And then be like, man, I'm getting so sick of, because we just get sick of things. We just get bored of
Damned
things.
if you do, damned if
And
you
so it
don't.
just doesn't matter. The pendulum will continue to swing, and there's always room for both then. And there is room for like that high polish, high finish, and some of the like, there's a time and a place to see that stuff too. And you kind of expect it with certain brands. And others, you're like, sometimes can you just can you just loosen the belt buckle on that top button like for a second and just breathe and be a human? I'm watching this damn show Severance right now, which I think a lot of people are, and it's because of the young people in my office. I'm watching it. And there is a scene where this gal's like, can you just talk like a fucking human? And I was like, yes, that's what I feel all the time. And so I do. We've carved out the space where we can just talk like humans, because I got tired of it at some point in my career. I was like, it's too stuffy in here. Like, I can't breathe. I need to go create my own space, so I never have to worry about that ever again. And that can exist, but that is not where I feel comfortable. And
Well,
so,
I think, there's in my own experience, people sometimes expect, because I talk about, I'm just a farm kid with a nursing degree, worked on a ranch, and then I wound up writing, I can't diagram a sentence. They then expect me to be anti-academic. And I'm not at all. I think, we've suffered plenty for anti-intellectualism in this country. And some of my greatest mentors are absolute like academic MFA. They know the language. They can deconstruct the text, all those things I can't do. I've learned a ton from them. Now, that doesn't mean that I then try to just be like them. I still want to be a semi-roughneck, but trying to write beautiful things. And so it's finding one of the examples that I love to give, and I promise this is a hunting related story. So there's this French philosopher, Montaigne. He's dead now. Been dead for hundreds of years. But
all the good ones are.
yeah. And there are academics who have built entire careers parsing just one of his essays. Whereas I was sitting in my deer stand one day reading him on my iPhone, and I thought, well, I think I should write a book about French philosophy. And so I had a crack at it, and I did a book with HarperCollins, and it's called it's called Montaigne in Barn Boots. The barn boots, hopefully indicating that, we're going to talk about philosophy here, but it's going to be approachable. But when it came time to do the cover for this book, there's this whole team in New York City sitting on the 17th floor of a glass building in Manhattan that is working for me. And I'm very grateful to them. They do great work and they're good at what they do. But occasionally it's fun to remind them that sometimes out here in the Midwest, we think things up all by ourselves. And so the story that has to do with hunting is, we had this meeting and I was on my phone. This was a little pre-Zoom, but I was on my phone. They were all around a big table in Manhattan and on a speakerphone. And they said, well, what do you want for the cover? And I said, well, you guys are the pros. You come up with a cover. It'll be great. And they had this award-winning book jacket designer. And I'm not being catty. Like, he really was the guy. And I was lucky to have him. I said, you're good at what you do, just do it. But I said, but if you use a picture of this philosopher, this Montaigne, I think there are only 3 images of him extant. They're engravings or paintings because of the times he lived in. And I said, so whatever image of him you use, he must be wearing a blaze orange ear flapper cap. And there was just silence on the other end.
Serious?
Like,
And
what
then
the
all
hell?
of a sudden, this award-winning, nationally recognized book jacket designer says, what is a blaze orange ear flapper cap? And I said, well, you're in luck. I got one right here by the writing desk. And I snapped a picture of my hunting hat. And to his credit, if you go to sneezingcow.com and look on the store page there's a replication of the book cover, Montaigne in Barn Boots. He has a blaze orange ear flapper cap on, and the guy drew it for him. And he did a pretty good job, actually. But one of the things was, I said to them, now, when you do the orange, it has to be a specific orange. And I have a buddy from northern Wisconsin who's a wonderful graphic designer, and I contacted him. He's a deer hunter too. And I said, hey, man, what's the technical, like the Pantone number or the code, whatever it is they use for DNR approved street legal blaze orange. And he sent it to me. And so I sent it to New York and I said, whatever you do, you have to use this color orange. Well, a couple months passed. They send me the mock-up of the cover. It's great. It's fine. But the orange isn't even close. And so another meeting, they're all at the table on the speakerphone. I'm here in rural Wisconsin. And they said, well, what do you think of the cover? I said, it looks great. But I said, but the one thing I asked you to do was get that right color orange, and you didn't. So we got to change that. And the guy said, well, we talked about it and we just figured no one would notice the difference.
What?
Oh,
Got about
oh, I said,
300,000 people here.
this may be why the country is in the shape it's in. And so to their credit, it's difficult to replicate Blaze Orange on paper. They did a pretty good job, but the hardcover of that book has a spine, a cloth spine that is dyed. You can take that bad boy deer hunting with you. It is street legal. So
That's
it's just
awesome.
these moments of where it's not about me making fun of them or writing them off. I've learned from them. They're learning from me. I think it's great. Oh yeah, there it is.
You can kind of see it
Yeah,
here a
that
little
book
bit.
that book was conceived in a deer stand, believe it or not. The idea for it.
What is
I
his
do a lot
philosophy?
of writing in deer stands. I do a lot of editing, and I always say that. So I will print out when I'm working on a book. I'll print it out in a small format so that it'll fit into the pocket of my hunting pants, and then I'll go sit in a deer stand or sometimes even a duck blind. And I always joke that I am PETA's favorite hunter because I have missed so many deer and birds because instead of watching the tree line, I was writing with a red pen on a piece of paper. I like to say somewhere in something I wrote, I don't remember. I'm not so conceited that I can just quote myself ad infinitum, but somewhere I wrote, I was the only hunter, I believe, I can't prove this, but I believe I was the only hunter, the biggest buck I ever not missed, but missed my opportunity on during archery season. This beautiful, huge buck came up, but he spotted me. I was reading. And I like to say that I was the only a hunter ever in the history of Chippewa County, Wisconsin to miss a giant buck because he caught me reading Alexander Pope's Essay on Man.
I love that. Oh, that's great. That's great.
Claim to fame right there.
There's a lot of people that read in the stand. I think that's
Yeah.
fairly common because it's
Also, sleeping is a hugely underrated means of attracting deer, right? Surely
not
you've covered
underrated for me. I've woken up to there's a story gun hunting one year where it was Sunday and I'm like, nothing's happening.
Nothing's gonna
Nothing's
move.
happening anymore. I'm tired, because Saturday night and another early Sunday, so I'm just dozing off on this ridge up against a tree, and I hear you hunt long enough, when a deer makes a noise versus a squirrel or another hunter or whatever. And I heard it. My brain goes, "That's a deer." Open my eyes. Here he comes. I wake up, just sit up, put my elbow on my knee, and I'm like, "You're done, dude." he sees me, he starts to turn, boom, 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 just down he goes.
So it worked out.
Oh, it worked out. He woke me up and I shot him for it. It was like it actually worked out. This is pretty great. I think it's that buck right behind you, actually, that buck on that skull mount.
my brother is my brother John, who's 2 years younger than me. I sent you guys a picture of my very first deer, which was a tiny little spike, and he's with me, and he wasn't old enough to carry a gun yet. And you can see in his eyes, he's just dying to do it. And as the years have gone on, he's a tremendous good shot. He's a far better hunter than I. He reloads all his own ammo. He's one of those guys. But man, the first, say, 6 or 8 years of our deer hunting history, he got so peeved at me because he was the hunter. He was up before dawn. He would sit for hours. He did everything right. And I was the guy, I'd wake up like half hour after sunrise and wander out and sit down, and then I'd shoot one. And he really, the one year it was super cold, and he got up before dawn, sat down in a stand out in this big 40 that we had. And then I wandered out after daylight, had a sandwich with me, crawled up into the stand, ate the sandwich. And, after you eat the sandwich, you get a little sleepy. And then the sun came out and was warming me up. So between the sun and the sandwich, while I fell dead asleep. And then my brother finally, after sitting for 6 hours in the freezing cold, finally gets down from his stand. As he gets down from his stand, he kicks up a buck. It runs, and like your story, it runs toward me. I hear the snap. I wake up, shoot it, and he just shaking his head. He's like, "No, man, this is not right."
It crossed his mind just to keep walking home and let you drag it out by yourself.
Yeah, right.
It crossed his mind.
I will say, over time, he has caught up and passed me, and it doesn't bother him like it used to. He's great. My brother's a real roughneck. Like I said, he does his own ammo. He's one of these jack of all trades guys. He's got a dump truck, an equipment trailer, and a backhoe, and a log skidder, and he has a sawmill, and he can do anything. But he also has a little single engine airplane, and I always joke. I mentioned earlier about I grew up. I know how to work. I'm not afraid of physical labor. Firefighting, working on the farm, logging. But I don't have the aptitude to fix things or build things. And my brother, the jack of all trades guys, he can just do pretty much anything. He's got his own earth moving equipment and everything. And the story I tell is that he always wanted to be a pilot, so he got his pilot's license. Then he wanted an airplane, so he got an old airplane, tore it apart, put it back together. Then, since he had a pilot's license and an airplane, he wanted an airport, so he took his bulldozer and he made an airport. And then I said, whereas I am a really fast typer. So, as you can see, it's tough for me at Thanksgiving. But where this comes back to deer hunting, he shares our goofy, roughneck, blue collar sense of humor. And one of my favorite moments was he had his old, I don't want to say beat up airplane because it's safe, but it's really old and it is not going to win any beauty contests. And I forget what I think it was the Brush Ape or something was the name of it. He had on the side in pencil. And one day during deer season, he goes, "Hey, I got a new way." And you know how you used to see, you don't see it so much anymore, but way back in the day, people would be hauling deer around on the roof of their car or across the trunk. And so I come out, he's got his plane parked there, and he's got this deer draped over the cowling like he's going to fly it to town.
That's a good way to go right there. It'd be quite the tumble if it fell off for any
Well,
reason.
you just ease it up into prop and you got all your hamburgers.
Yeah. Process the deer.
That didn't take long.
Got the meat tenderized, and once it hit the ground, we're good to go. That's great. No, it sounds like where you come from is a pretty cool area. I mean, you're definitely from a part of Wisconsin that I think most people would consider Wisconsin to be like. We're right outside the city here. We're in between Milwaukee and Madison. So
you guys are you in Oconomowoc?
I'm literally in Oconomowoc. Yeah.
Well, so this is not a hunting story, but it's one of my favorite stories I tell. It does relate to the New York thing, right? I work with people in New York and in LA. And again, I can't stress enough, these are good people. They've changed my life. They're good at what they do. And getting back to the hunting thing, we live in an age where everybody wants to suit up in two teams and bash the heck out of each other. And I've traveled all over this country. I've hung out with, written about, worked beside, fought fires with people of every stripe. And it ain't about me being all open-minded. It's about me being grateful that I'm allowed to meet all these really cool people. And if I cut off half of them, well, then I just cheat myself. But anyways, I am going to make fun of the New York people a little bit here because one of the things they'll do is they'll set up my book tours. And that's actually a really complicated job, because even for a dummy like me, where it's just me traveling around, you got to coordinate, flights and cars and dates. And so you move one piece and everything else falls apart. So by the time someone has put together a month-long book tour for you, you need to be grateful to them because they've worked really hard. And I am grateful to them. But it's always funny because they'll send me around the US, but at some point they'll have me do a reading in Madison and a reading in Milwaukee, of course. And more than once, I'll get a call from a New York publicist and they say, well, you're going to be in Madison and then Milwaukee. And by the way, as long as you're in that area, there's a great little bookstore in Okonoma. I wonder
if it's one right by my house. We've got a great little bookstore right here. That's fantastic. Well, we have a really nice little bookstore here in Oconomowoc.
Yeah, man.
That's
it's
cool.
a Books and Company.
Yes, that's great. The one. It's I'm probably a 1-minute drive from that.
Yeah, Lisa down there, man, she's been so good to me over the years.
Next time you're in Oconomowoc, just kidding. Next time you're in town, give me a holler. We'll grab some coffee at the Stone Creek, which is like the next door over. We'll get a
Yeah,
burger,
I've done
bag
some
of water.
shows at the Arts Center there too.
Oh, really? Okay, that's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a good little community. I like it here. Derek's what 45 minutes north-ish of here in West Bend area. And Greg's in a little town called Lake Mills, which is a little bit more towards Madison.
Lake Mills, they got a beautiful stone library. And I just did a gig there too at a brew pub.
Wow.
Nice.
Greg would now he's gonna listen to go, oh. If he was on this episode, he'd give you 10 stories about that.
On the name. And I think they just within the last year, I wrote a play. I have a book called Population 485, which is about being a volunteer firefighter in a small town. And I turned it into a play. And I think they did the play in Lake Mills in the last few months.
Oh, it's awesome.
Yeah. Hey man, I'll do whatever it takes to. It's not true anymore because they've aged out of this. But what I always used to say is that I'll do whatever it takes to, because I have one kid in college and one kid in braces. So you got to work them multiple revenue streams.
No, your disposition towards in your viewpoint on life is really I appreciate it a lot. I feel like I have a similar mindset. You know, cutting off half the people like just makes it worse for you because you know I think it was the book the Laws of Human Nature, and I can't remember the person who said it or the quote. I'm not going to get it right at all, but it was like along the lines of every person you meet, whether like bad, good, or indifferent, you should treat as like discovering new land. Like you should want to go explore that land and treat like their mind as like this discovery process that you can go learn from. And even if they're bad, what an interesting place to go explore is like to just explore that person's mind for a second. How entertaining is that going to be for you? You know, if nothing else entertaining, and if something positive might actually have some real value to hold. And there's nothing you can't learn from anybody. Like you're going to learn something from everybody you come across, and whether they're good or bad, you're going to learn something. And I like that. I've really kind of adopted a lot of that approach in my thing. And it's like, I'm not going to, I'd rather have like some sorts of like compassion towards someone that's not only being bullied, but also the bullier, because they probably went through some terrible shit that made them be that way. You know, got to have compassion for both. That's human. Like, you know, can't, it's like music. You can't appreciate music if you only like one genre. You kind of gotta like, if you're going to really appreciate it, you got to hear all of it. And I think that's you got to meet all the people to appreciate all. And some people are like, fuck people, I want to be alone. I don't want to see any people. And yeah, I think that could get lonely at some point. And I think maybe some of your books touch on that. So
well, yeah, I talk about spending time. I am very much a loner. I've learned to be very outgoing in public settings, and I actually I do one-man humor shows in little theaters, and I have a band, and we do several shows a year, and I do a lot of public speaking and corporate speaking. And I actually really enjoy it. But in between, I'm in a little room above my garage here. I can look out the window and see the back 40. And man, I'd never leave here if I didn't have to. But one of the dangers of that, and I have written about it, is that I always say like truckers and farmers and writers, people who spend a lot of time alone. My other brother's a logger, you know, and he's up logging alone a lot. When you have a profession where you're on your own a lot, you tend to do what I call, you polish up your capital T theories. And you have a lot of theories about things. And I'm just as guilty as anybody. I'm like, oh, this is the way it is. And if it should be this way, and it's not. And I've got a few of those friends that are thankfully close enough and honest enough. I'll polish my theory all alone in my own little vacuum for months. And then I'll come out into the public with it. And I'll say to my friend, well, you know, here's the deal on how that is. And my one buddy, especially a guy named Zeus, he just goes, yeah, no, that's not even close to accurate. Oh, right. Well, I worked really hard on it.
Oh, that's great. No, that's not accurate. Thanks, Zeus. Appreciate you. That's pretty funny.
My guy Zeus, I've written about him. He's a dear friend, and his name is Zeus Stark. And people always say, that's a very unusual name. And I'd say, yeah, you'd think so until you find out that Zeus is his middle name. His first name is Buffalo. His parents were children of the 60s. Go figure.
Oh, Buffalo Soldier. That's fantastic. I think it's like inertia. The more you're around people, well, that might not be entirely true. The more you might want, the more you're alone, the more you want to stay that way. I think like an object in motion stays in motion when that doesn't want to go back in motion. I come and go in spurts like that. If I get active, you can't stop me. But if I fall off the wagon and I get lazy,
When
I
are
want to
you
be
unactive?
I want to be so lazy.
I've known you for a few years now. I've not seen that side
It
yet.
exists. It exists. Just give me a nice joint and I'll just sink into the couch and be like, I'm not fucking moving. And it's but then but like because I don't ever do that, you know. It's like that'd be I long for a day like that once a year maybe where I can just like stop moving for a second. It doesn't end. But yeah, the people that are alone are probably like, no, I'm a loner and I'm gonna be this way. And that's kind of like it's hard to let people in. And I think that yeah. Which book was it?
I gotta
think it
just
was-
interject. This isn't a question, Michael. You tell me if you've already done something like this. But when I saw your truck a love story and you know how we're gonna relate this to a deer hunting podcast, especially ours, all I could think about was, man, I wish there would be a section in the back or in the middle where there was just 30 color photos of tailgate deer pictures. Because those were always my dad's favorite photos to take. He didn't ever take a photo of him with the deer. He never wanted the grip and grin. All he wanted was that deer laying on the tailgate or whatever, you know, him and his buddies got the tailgate photo. So like our photo album up at the cabin is just tailgate shots. And sometimes they're standing in, but like that's the coffee table book I want is the love story of the tailgate.
I
And
like that.
maybe we can make a post like that with
I
this,
like
you
that.
know, and post your
Yeah,
tailgate.
what is it?
your
Ranella
buck and a
does
truck
the
pic.
fucked up old tree stands or something like that.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
could
yeah.
just-
The buck and the truck pics, man. Those bring
Fucking
back
the truck, that's great.
yeah.
Yeah, we used to have, I think I sent you one of my second deer, which is a very tiny little deer. And I still remember that day with all the clarity. You know, we talked earlier about what this is really about, and it's that moment, isn't it? And but we had a barn, and we always used to hang them out of there was a hole in the side of the barn, and Dad would hang a rope there, and that's where all the deer always hung. And my mom was not a hunter. She was all for the meat, and she'd cook it and everything, but she did not come from a hunting background, and so she was always a little leery of us hanging deer up. But nowadays, I got a Skinner down in my pole barn, man. And of course, now that, you know, you were talking about the old days and the terms even that we've lost. Like, I remember you'd always get done at the end of the day and then you go, oh, I got to go register. And
yeah,
so
we gotta go
register.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, and of course, that was a whole, there's a scene in, I have the book Population 485. I talk about coming into my hometown, and if it's deer hunting, that there would be a line of trucks with deer heads hanging off the tailgates, just like you just described.
You had to factor that into your commute home. When we got to stop and register the deer, you had to factor that into your commute.
Or even if you didn't see anything, it's like, well, we should swing by and get something from the gas station where you registered just to see what's there, see if anybody
Yeah.
else got.
You had to
You
get
gotta
out and-
go look.
Yeah, and if say that you did get a big buck, you might find a reason that, oh, and I got to stop at such and such to grab something.
Yeah, right. I gotta stop here too, and I gotta stop there. Well, while we're at it, let's just make one more stop here. You just like yeah.
The one year. Well, my mom and I had 2 years because my mother started hunting when I was, I think, 14, because she
Mhm.
realized quickly that at the age of 12, when I started hunting, Dad and I were going to be gone for 3 months out of the year. And me being an only child, she wasn't going to see her family, so she was like, "Well, shit, I got to do something to remedy this." So she picked up hunting, and we had 2 years where her and I both got bucks opening day, and the one year we both got real nice ones up in the Nicolay. And Dad went hunting in the morning. Mom and I slept in. I think we went and got breakfast with the bucks in the truck. And man, we must have put on 30, 40 miles for no reason, just driving around,
That's awesome.
waving. Oh, yeah.
It's like that's your year. It's like when your team wins the Super Bowl. It's like you gotta gloat about it a little bit, almost, to just be like, this isn't gonna happen again for a while.
Yeah.
You gotta kind of soak it up a little bit,
Oh, we
because
soaked
God
it.
knows the next time you're gonna have that moment. And when you have that moment, everyone knows what that moment's like, and it's a moment. It's definitely a moment where you're gonna get that opportunity. Because next year, my thing is like once it's kind of like when you see a cop when they have someone pulled over, you're kind of like, all right, I can speed now because like it's gonna be a minute. They got someone, like they're not gonna-
That moment I actually still hold over my dad, because where we went for breakfast that morning, there's a place in Townsend right off Highway 32 called Carla's Country Kitchen. It's now
Okay.
owned and run by her son, Kevin, really nice guy. He and his wife run it now. But Carla has been running that for 40 years, and it's a mainstay to the little town up there. And my dad actually worked for a small engine shop when he was like 15, 16. He would live up there in the summer. His parents had a cabin up there. And so he's known Carla. They're like the same age. He's known Carla, grew up with her, known her forever. She's never bought him a breakfast. He's, eats there all the time. Never bought him a breakfast. The morning I went there, Mom and I, with those bucks, she bought us both breakfast. And I told my dad that. He's like, "You got to be shitting. I've known her. She bought you breakfast." So I still bring that up to him here and there when we drive by Carla's Country Kitchen.
Oh, that's pretty funny.
Carla brought me breakfast.
Just putting the salt in the wound there, Derek.
Yeah, it's fun.
You got to
I think that, that's interesting too, because I like now, of course, that you can register on your phone and it makes things easier. And I like that my deer now here, I go out back and I'll shoot a deer and it never leaves the farm. It just goes from the field to the freezer. And I've got a skinner down in the shed and I skin it myself and we butcher them ourselves at home. And but there is a little something lost from that moment of having to go to town. And usually growing up, it was usually at the gas station or the bait station. And there's a certain sociability to that went beyond just bragging. Bragging was part of it. But
I've heard they've opened some of these stations back up just for like you don't have to go there, but it's kind of like they are trying to bring some of that back a little bit. Again, that pendulum swinging. I think the new terminology is rather than I got to go to the register. I got to go register. Now it's like, oh shit, I forgot to register. It's not like a thing. I'm like, oh shit, where's my phone? Like, Jesus Christ, I'm gonna get myself in trouble here. Like, what am I doing? Of course I got to register the deer, but you just don't think of it because it's not like a tangible physical place you go to.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a good point.
You're too busy texting all your buddies. I got one. Oh shit. I should probably claim it,
Yeah, when 400 people know you got one before you've told the agency who manages them that you've got one.
Yeah, you might want to get your priorities in order. But I'm sure, like, I'm not saying don't go break the law, but just remember to go register your deer. That'd be a thing. Well, no, thanks for hanging out with us tonight, Michael. It's really cool to talk to you. You're a real cool fellow to meet, and I'm excited to dive into the books. We got a bit of a trip coming up here for spring break. I don't know if I'll get any time to read then or not because we'll be covered up in kids, but I do like to read, and I've been making a point to get more. I've been on the Kindle, and I do a lot of Audible, but there's a bunch of books that I just started scooping back up on, paperback and hardcover.
Yeah,
and I got myself a little night reader, and I enjoy reading paper.
Almost all of mine are on Audible, whatever. They're all on Kindle. They're all in paper. And then most of them are available in audio, no matter what format you listen to.
Are you the reader, or did you get a reader?
I'm the reader I have one book that's called The Scavengers, which is for younger readers. And it's told from the viewpoint I kind of wrote it for my daughters. And so it's told from the viewpoint of about a 12-year-old girl. So that would have been a bit of a stretch. But all my other ones, I do all my own reading. They just feel that my voice suits my tone of writing. And I tend to go back and forth from just knuckleheaded goofball to poetic. And so it's it seems to work out okay. And I always, by the way, if I can, I just say, if you go to sneezingcow.com, that's my website, and all the books are listed there. And the sneezingcow.com comes from, I did a humor album years ago called Never Stand Behind a Sneezing Cow. Really shouldn't have to explain that in your listening group. But sometimes when I'm on book tour out in, say, San Diego, San Francisco, LA, that area, I got to break out charts and everything. And
you look at Visual Organizer A.
Well, what I tell them is, I said, basically, it's a situation involving several of the properties of physics, like contents under pressure, ballistics, and the path of least resistance. And of course, inertia, although in this case, you might refer to it as inertia. If it's ever happened to you, and by the way, it has happened to me growing up on the farm.
Yeah, you only say it when it's happened. That's why. It's like I've walked into the grocery store and there's suddenly a sign on the refrigeration section by the milk that says, "This is not an exit." It's like, what the fuck? Like, clearly someone did it, because otherwise they wouldn't be here.
Well, if it's ever happened to you, and it has happened to me, what I like to say is it is a jaw-dropping experience, although that would not be your best move. So, but yeah, sneezingcow.com is kind of where you can go to michaelperry.com, but unfortunately some dude squatted on that years ago, which I don't blame him. His name is Michael Perry too, but it's spelled different than mine. So I feel like he really ripped me off. So
just trying to
I went with sneezingcow.com because people generally can remember that. So
Yeah, it is memorable, and I have the koozie you send as well, and I got
oh, you got the merch. Yeah.
and I got the sticker on the
Oh,
on
excellent.
the gun
Yeah.
safe back here. So
Yeah, there it is right here.
all the stuff that we get because it's
That's those multiple revenue streams I was talking about.
yeah you gotta make
Diversify.
everything
Books
count.
ain't selling, you better trot out the stickers and koozies.
People have stickers. We move a lot of stickers. It's crazy. I mean, people expect them for free. I think a lot of times, but there is a cost to them, and they're not free for us.
We
That
did
being
learn that the hard way. I do a lot of live events, and we have
Yeah.
a big merch table with books and T-shirts and everything, and we have the stickers out too. And we finally realized we had to put a big sign on how much the stickers cost because people, lovely folks with who have no history of theft, but they were just snatching those
Just
stickers.
grab 'em. Yeah, we got a trade show coming up here, and that we had to figure that out. We had to learn that. But one thing I found fascinating is come hunting season, which was also peak buying season for us for our merch. I've never bought a sticker in my life, and so the fact that we have them for sale on our website, I've had to like take subjectivity out of things because I'm thinking, who's gonna buy a sticker? I wouldn't buy a sticker. Who people buy stickers? We'll get orders for like $100 or $200 of stickers.
Yeah.
And I'll look at 'em like, who just bought $150 worth of stickers? People do it. It's crazy. I'm like, wow, that's good for you, man. Like we should have some sort of bulk discount at that level. Like what's
Should
going
get
on
a
here?
printed award.
Where did they go? Like, and we've sent orders to every state in the country now, including Canada and Alaska. And Canada's not a state. I'm not saying that. I'm just
I see what you're saying.
Yeah, they've gone everywhere. But the sticker
Well,
thing
it
is
was.
fun.
Oops, I'm sorry. I just ran my bill of my New Auburn Fire Department cap right into my microphone.
That happens.
I just wanted to not get off the show here first without saying thanks because I mentioned before I do a lot of interviews, but they're usually about promoting a book or promoting a live event or a show. But there's two parts of my life that don't necessarily have anything to do with what I do for a living, but are absolutely central. And one of them is being a volunteer firefighter and first responder. But the other is deer hunting, hunting in general and fishing too. But deer hunting is number one. It's the one, even on years when I've been too busy to do anything else, I have not missed a Wisconsin deer hunting season, gun season, since third grade, like I said. And
incredible.
it's been a real pleasure to hang out with you guys. It felt like we were at camp and telling stories about hunting and why we love it. So I really appreciate it.
It's a tradition, man. The don't miss a deer camp thing has caused me a couple of bruisers in the old marriage. But hell or high water, I think like deer camp is
Well
like
worth it.
I don't know. Yeah, it's interesting. But I'm not trying to air my dirty laundry on my own podcast.
I remember way back, I was a bachelor for 39 years. There's a lot of reasons for that, but that's not what today's show is about. But I remember when I really started getting serious about writing, and I was every day, hours and hours. And it's what it took. I did that for 5 years almost just to break in. And I remember I was dating someone at the time, a wonderful person. And I can't stress that enough, truly a remarkable individual. But I remember sitting in her apartment typing, and she was on the couch. And I just remember her saying, it seems like you want to write more than you want to be with me. And I remember inside going, oops.
You are right.
And I can't really lie.
Very observant of you.
She already sees the answer on my face. And and I feel a little bad about that, although she went on to have a very full life with someone who was very much not into writing. So good for her.
Yeah. So there's a lot of people that feel that same way about deer hunting.
I think I had mentioned on the podcast before, but I met my wife like when we started like dating because we had gone to high school together. It didn't really work in the same circles, and then we re-met up at a friend's house. But it was the day I had just killed a buck, like the Thursday.
So you're on a high. So she's seen the best
Thursday
version of
gun
yourself.
season. Yeah, but also think about like she's starting at my end, so she's not going to be concerned with me deer hunting.
It's like the movie Fever
for
Pitch.
like
Yeah.
9 months, and I just kept warning her. I'm like, look, you're getting a lot of me, but just know that it's gonna be different.
There's a hole in this.
When September comes. You're gonna be like, where the hell do you go? I
I'll
was
go-
really nervous. I was really nervous about that.
Is she gonna stick with me through this? Does she really know what she's getting into? There's concessions you got to make at some point. You got a family, you got to walk it back a little bit, but people got to love who you are through and through.
You just got to become more efficient.
Yeah. Yeah, I have my own problems. Serial entrepreneur, but not really, because I like, I'm not like sold a business or like made it to some like degree of serial entrepreneurship. I'm like a serial entrepreneur, which is worse.
I just say I'm after 30 years of freelancing, I'm terminally unemployable. So
Yeah, no one would hire you. Be like, all right, so like, you've never had any structure. What about your HR department? That's me.
I think the one thing that does occur to me again, as I'm trying to say the right thing, if I've said the wrong thing at all today, is the one thing I didn't mention either is that I have written about this. You'll find this in some of my essays and stuff. So I'm not just making it up on the fly. Deer hunting for me is my New Year's. I'll go out into the woods and it's gotten more and more this way the older I've gotten too. I really still want to get a deer. I still really want to get a nice buck. But above all, I need to sit out there for as many days in a row as possible. And I've written about, people talk about nature and they tend to be, oh, nature is healing and it's lovely and it's beautiful. Yeah, all of that is true. But you know what else it is? It's merciless. And if you're having a bad year, or if you're going through a rough patch, or if you've made some mistakes in your life and you're sitting in a tree in the middle of nowhere, you can't hide from it. And you're forced to confront what went well, what did not go well. And so I've found that over the years, more and more for me, that week in November is me sitting in the woods, kind of looking back at the year past and going, what worked out, what didn't work out, and what are we going to do in the year to come? And so I also just wanted to make sure I mentioned that. It's a really, to me, New Year's starts on the last day of deer hunting, not January 1st.
I like that. I like that comment you just made, and something I've always thought about similar to that, but probably a little bit different wording, is that like when I'm sitting up there and thinking about all the things that maybe didn't go well, or these little, moot problems that I'm dealing with that are bothering me, and then you see something like a coyote running through, or a bobcat, or some kind of predator looking for its next meal, and you realize that none of the shit that's bothering you is a freaking big deal because life goes on without you and your little tiny problems. Helps put things back into perspective for me big time, being part of that.
You look at that rock face and you go, that thing's been here for millions of years. It really doesn't give a crap about
it. Doesn't give a crap about my problems. I'm gonna suck it up.
Boutique situation here.
Yep.
Yeah, this whole process has been going on for generations. I'll be forgotten, like the deer that have died in these woods have been forgotten, or have never even realized. It's it's fun to be human, and it's really fun to be a human that deer hunts. But yeah, Michael, thanks for being here. And guys, go check out sneezingcow.com to see. I mean, there's gonna be a book for you in there for sure. There's lots to choose from. When you've been writing as long as you got a good body of work.
Sweet. I enjoyed it. Thanks a bunch. Yeah. We'll catch you down the road.